We should be going live. Hopefully we are live right now. Just double checking. Yep, we're live. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone out there in the great wide world. My name is Brian Francis. I am a contributing editor at Gamasutra. And we are here today to play a little game called The Great Whale Road. But here in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see I'm joined by three wonderful faces, and I am the tiny face, so I'll wave a little bit so you can see me, but you probably can't see me. Alex, could you start off by introducing yourself?
Sure. Hey, hi. My name is Alex. I'm an editor at Gamasutra, and we are very happy to have both of you here today. If you want to introduce yourselves in any order you please.
Mary.
Oh, I get to go first. Hi, I'm Mary. I'm one of the writers on The Great Whale Road.
Hi there, I'm Joachim. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Sunburn Games and the co-writer and partner of crime of Mary in writing all the stories you will find on The Great Whale Road.
Right on. So yeah, just to get kicked things off, Great Whale Road just came out of early access. For those of you who have not heard of it. And we are playing the battle sequence for it right now, which is kind of a turn-based turn-based combat RPG at this end, and then it's also kind of like a tribe simulator. Like you go through these quests and random events. It's, to me, I've described it as kind of feels sometimes like King of Dragon Pass, sometimes feels like Banner Saga. How did you all come? Sort of where did the game start from, and what made you go for Steam Early Access to get it out the door?
Yeah, so the whole, I think King of Dragon Pass is a good starting point. It was for sure one of the inspirations behind the title, behind the idea. There was something where I read too many historical, it's too much historical fiction, especially around the early medieval period. So the things like things which are like on TV now, like Vikings-related stuff. Yeah, and I remember these old 1920s, 1930s comics, Prince Valiant, and looking at games like the King of Dragon Pass, I thought, hey, that's something might be possible to actually turn this into a game. And then a few similar games or games which were a bit unusual happened. So there was like the Banner Saga happened, and Sunless Sea happened. There were lots of suddenly very story-based, story-heavy games out there, which were 2D or partially 2D. And I thought, hey, maybe the idea is not so crazy, and we can go down that direction.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about Sunburn, if it's okay with you. I find your guys' situation fascinating because you're distributed, right? So like the studio itself is based in Spain, yeah?
We are actually relatively small indie studio. So we are based in Valencia, which is like a town 3-4 hours south of Barcelona, and we have most of our team are actually based here in Valencia. When we started, we tried to hire people who had like game degrees, game art, fine art degrees from local universities, and got started that way. And then we looked for talent further afield. Mary came across us actually last year, yeah, and
Yes.
because we needed someone who actually helped us on the writing side, because until then it was only me, and it was just like, at the moment we have written, how much text have we written now in words, Mary?
It's got to be hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot of words.
Yeah, I think the translators, they counted more closely than us, because they get paid by the word. I think the last time I checked, we must be closing in on 125,000 or so, and we have like I say another 50,000 scheduled. In a way, if we can get it somehow sorted for the next, which we would like to add for the next 2 updates. So there is a lot of stories, a lot of events which have been written, put in the game already, and a lot of stuff we would like to do over the next 2-3 months to have the game at a nice point before the summer.
Nice. Is this is Sunburn's first game? Is that right?
Yes, it's our first game, which is quite an exciting adventure, and also quite a learning curve. I mean, I've been in software engineering for a very long time, but it's actually my first game as a writer / let's call it executive producer.
So let's dig into that, because that's fascinating. First of all, what did you work on before you worked on this? What software?
God, everything. I did like mobile finance. I used to work for a short time for like Clue Mobile in mobile game distribution, banking software from like online to mobile to core. So lots of different stuff. I mean, I'm quite old, yeah. So I've been in the industry since in some form of software engineering and IT since 1999. So I've covered a few areas.
I think there are a lot of people out there who have the skills and the chops to make games, but they are not currently in the industry, and they're looking to switch careers and get in. So I think it's really valuable if you want to talk a bit about what you learned moving to game development and working on your first project.
Okay, let me start, and then Mary can chime in, because she's actually she crosses over from journalism, which is something totally different as well, really, So now for me, I think the biggest learning curve is that while the technology is quite similar, and even the basic project processes are quite similar. Think about software engineering, classic software engineering, and game development. You still have that creative component, which usually throws a spanner into the works whenever you're not looking, And you also have to make sure that this slightly less measurable part, like having fun, making it interesting with the art component, needs to work together. It's usually if you build like a software, it just needs to be usable, it needs to look relatively clean, and it should more or less work. But it's not like nobody says it needs to be super pretty or it needs to be super interesting or super exciting. So you have it's a slightly more challenging in a way to actually produce and create something which is which keeps people spending maybe 10, 12, 20 hours with and actually having fun. Not like treating it like they treat like SAP or some kind of enterprise management software.
So Mary, what's it been like? Is this the first game you've written for? And if so, what have you learned?
Yes, it is. It is my first shipped game. Oh my goodness. I'm also a master's. Isn't it good to say that? So it's my first game. I'm also a master's student in game design, so I've made some of my own projects, but it's very different to work with a studio on something this big. And like you said, I crossed over from journalism, so I'm used to writing. I worked at the Tampa Bay Times, the New York Times, and some other big newspapers. But the biggest difference in games writing is all of your writing has to be part of this bigger package, and you have to think of that constantly, versus in a newspaper, your story is the core, and that's all that matters, and you're kind of star of the show. But with a game, the mechanics are going to matter as much as the art, which is going to matter as much as the story, and everything really has to work well together for a full experience. So it's much more team-based than I think it gets credit for to work in games. So be good at working in teams if you want to make a game.
Yeah, most definitely. Have you found it challenging to work remotely?
It hasn't been that bad for me. I don't know if the studio would agree because when waiting things from me, it's been pretty okay though. We've kept in constant contact either by email or weekly Skype calls. So it really hasn't been bad, especially with writing where I'm pretty much my first drafts at least I'm doing on my own, and then and then they go forward from there. I think the hardest part, I didn't get to see as much of the gameplay like up to date as would have been awesome, but that's the biggest thing I missed, I think.
Yeah, right, I think that must be the hardest for Mary, because she's really, we sometimes have people who are a little bit further away, like one or two guys in Portugal or somebody in Germany, or translators, but because Mary was there from like quite early on in the process, to actually not being able to share every build with her immediately or say, hey, what do you think about that, and how does this impact what we're writing, and also making sure that that some of the world building which was in my head, try to make sure that when she writes her parts of the game that they actually fit into the historical world, is for sure slightly harder to communicate when you're afar. And it would have been maybe easier if we were in one room and we could sit together on a whiteboard and talk those things through that way. Yeah, but that's, I think, in a way, it's not that easy to find find the right talent for the game. Yeah, and then you just have to make it work.
Yeah, for sure. Brian, can you give us an update on what's going on? Because like I feel like I don't even know where you're going.
Sure. I'm playing. I've made it into the like sort of the core of the first game. It's kind of, which is still kind of like, to me, it feels a little tutorial-y to go through this section, but it's where the adventure begins, if you will. We've landed in the first town you encounter. We've gone through a few of the scripted sequences that I'm sure Mary and Joachim worked on. Sorry, I hope I said your name right there. Where we're at is now kind of the first combat sequence against someone who isn't in your tribe. So just moving my soldier out here. I think what I've observed is like this is the place where like you first get to start making interesting decisions in like mini games. You're sort of making them hoping that you're gonna, you're not gonna like set yourself up for failure earlier on. So I guess my question for both of you is how do you sort of evaluate in your own mind? I really should have told her to just get right to it, shouldn't I? How do you sort of gauge those early moments of the game where you try to convince players that what they're doing is important without also scaring them into like scaring them off from the game itself?
Very good question. I think we're not doing an extremely great job at that because we have been improving it during early access. I think our first version was slightly more brutal in a way of like pushing the player into the North Sea and see if they can swim. Yeah, I think we've changed the start a bit in a way that now we ease them into this into the storyline and we allow them like this first trial combat. They get like the first winter management decisions a bit. We make it a bit easier so it's not too overwhelming to the players. And then actually also the first journey is a very short one, and it's still within this, even from a story perspective, it's just like to the neighbor, more or less just to the neighboring village. Yeah, so it's still a fairly friendly environment. Yeah, it's a Danish village. The whole story is set in, and you're just traveling across to the mainland and visit the next biggest marketplace. And so it's a little bit like if somebody from like North New York, visits the Big Apple. So it's a bit scary, but it's not totally overwhelming.
Nice.
Story-wise, I'm sorry. I think it's a balance of introducing you with the mechanics and also letting you know that there is this big cool story that's about to happen. So when you see the like opening screens and when people start telling you what's happening, you get right away that something big is at play here. But then we don't show you what the big nasty is yet, right? You just know it's got to be there somewhere. So right away, you want to know what the big nasty is, but you're going to have a little bit of time to ease your way into figuring that out.
Yeah, right on.
Pretty sure that was game jargon, and I just
no, like let it all hang out. Brian, I'm so excited. Oh, well, you caught this. Never mind. I was just so excited to tell you that your volume is a bit low because I'm always the one who's too low.
Alex is like, finally, someone else. Finally. Mary, I have a question for. Well, I guess it's a question for both of you. What software were you working in America, and how were you able to get like prototype the interactions you're working with, get it over to the team in Spain, and get it all figured out? Like, how did you make text work? Like, come up with ideas in America and get them into the game in Spain? I guess is my question.
Tell us about your tools.
My tools. So I think I have the least interesting answer of anybody on the team because my tools were Google. We wrote everything, just in a pretty ordinary document. We had our own like formatting system for showing you how choices worked, and then I didn't do the scripting. So pretty much for me it was Google. Yeah, that was pretty much where I ended.
Right on. Did you get to? Were you using like Excel or anything to save all the strings, or were you sending over just like Word docs of text?
We used Excel to track some of the quests. Yeah, so sometimes.
Yeah.
We have a master text file, yeah, which is like a Google Sheets, which Mary and the translators and I and the designer are using. But this is like in the second phase of the process. So first is let's call it the creative writing process, which is like where we use Google Docs and Mary's writing a draft, yeah, and then I write a draft, which is more or less fairly free format, and we try to hammer that into the game format, and then we used that to create the content in the master text file. And the master text file then is used to create JSON files, yeah. And those JSON files are really the heart of the game. So they are all the logic, all the event logic, the artificial intelligence, the enemies you fight, really all the small parts we have to change on a day-to-day basis. They live in JSON files, and that usually because it's a fairly archaic system we built very early on, back in 2015. Yeah, we haven't had much budget or time to actually upgrade it much. Yeah, so it was me who did the scripting because I had spent most of the time with it. Yeah, and so if you find any quest bugs, you can send me an angry email, and it's me who will have to fix it. And when I'm stuck, then the designer has to help me to sort out my mess usually. Yeah.
I guess my question came from because like I've had some experience with like the remote writing thing, and I've just always like I think game writers always benefit from learning about how writing is the tools as much as it is the creative stuff, and I've always like every writer has a different answer to that, just because I think one of the most interesting parts of our profession is that unlike other things, there's no one way to write a game. Like the scripting changes everything from game to game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely, if anybody is trying to get into games writing, just writing in as many formats as you can, and they don't have to be really fancy. You can make a choice script game pretty easily. You can use Sublime pretty easily, and just practicing writing in those tools, I think, can really, really help somebody who wants to write for a lot of different types of games.
Something maybe we gloss over a bit. What engine did you choose to build this game with? And
Unity.
Why'd you go? Yeah. So what was appealing to you about Unity?
I think first of all, it was something where we knew we had. It was easy to find people in Valencia who had experience with it. Yeah. So I think if you look at Europe, you will find that Unity, and nowadays I think Unreal is becoming stronger simply because the license model has changed. But I would say until the beginning of last year, it was like if you were doing an indie game, it was very likely that you would use Unity. Yeah, simply because for us as a company, the license model made sense, even if it had some challenges, and even if I'm not personally not a big fan of the subscription model. But in general, I think it's a decent, solid tool which allows you to prototype and then actually produce something relatively quickly, and with a solid support and ecosystem, which works.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking, why did you choose to set up shop in Spain, in Valencia? Like, I gather you are not a native-born Spanish citizen. So
no, is it that obvious? I try so hard to fit in. No, I'm Austrian, but I left Austria quite a few years ago. So we have been moving around a bit from Asia to London, and then after nearly 10 years of rain and cloudy skies, we decided, hey, actually, if we do something new, something different, then it would be nice to do it actually somewhere where there is occasionally sunshine. And so we were doing some. We have lots of Spanish friends in London, and they were recommending a few cities. We had a look at a few places, and we fell in love with Valencia. And so we decided to move here, and then we set the studio up here as well.
What's the please forgive me, but like, you know, it's very rare we get to talk to somebody who is set up down there. What's the game development scene like in Spain, in Valencia? What's the community like?
It's quite small. Yeah? I mean, there's like there are a few interesting studios which many people will know. There's, for instance, games like Gods Will Be Watching came out of Valencia. Rise and Shine came out of Valencia. This actually a few months ago. There are quite a few other titles. Studios are usually small, like us. Usually, sometimes combinations of freelancers who work like in a cooperative environment. It's of course in Europe in general, with a few exceptions, much harder to find funding. So we, for instance, until we got some support from GTR, we were solely self-funded, and we still largely are. So we are 95% self-funded, more or less, something like that, around those numbers. So you have to have either the time on your hands, or you have to have the money in your bank account, your savings account, to actually get the project started.
Right on. Something that this reminds me of, like, and this may not affect you at all, but I've been thinking about it. You know, mostly I've heard Spain recently in relation to the EU and to Brexit, and so I wonder, like, as you are looking to hire, you know, both around you and around the world, like, has that crossed your mind at all? Has that changed the way you're going to make games, or not really?
No, not really. I think for us in Europe, I mean, if you're on the continent, Brexit is a bit surreal, yeah, because especially, I think, yes, there are in some countries you have like Europe skeptic parties or movements, but by and large, I think the majority of Europeans on the continent is, especially in the western and southern and northern parts of Europe, is quite clear pro the European Union. So it was never really a topic, and I think actually, by large, maybe Brexit could actually be an opportunity for many countries in regards of actually expanding their game dev scene in Europe, because while London is a hub now, London might actually struggle in the next 2 years to attract the talent, and some of the smaller, well-funded studios might think about moving to Berlin or Barcelona or other of the tier 1 cities in Europe and start there. And it might actually be, we have seen people, there's just a few months ago, for instance, there's a new studio now in Valencia, Paloma Studios. These guys are from LA. So I think they are. So they just set up a shop here. So I think Spain is quite an interesting place, as is Europe overall. There's lots of opportunity.
It also kind of like begs the question why, when you're a studio based in Spain with folks in New York and stuff, why make a game about Vikings? Are you just like a big fan of the Vienna Vikings, or was there?
Yeah, maybe I've got very, very long time ago. I studied history in Vienna. I read history in Vienna. Sorry, it's like, and I fell in love with the early medieval period. And the game actually historically plays 150 years or so before the proper Viking Age starts. So it's like the pre-Viking Age, and which is quite an interesting period, because if you look at it, it's a period of change. It's quite, if you think about it in European history, it's a post-apocalyptic period. The Roman Empire has fallen apart. You have all those Germanic and Slavic tribes coming into Europe, changing the political structure, changing how people live, changing not only the political, also the demographic structure of the and cultural structure of those countries, or countries maybe too much, those regions. And in a way, that's quite interesting to see, if you think about it, that we have like big refugee movements across Africa and the Middle East. And Europe, of course, is much closer to that than, for example, the US.
Mm-hmm. Mary, just to build on that, what made you interested in the Viking in this period of history? What caught your attention and made you think this was a good setting for a game story?
Sure. So I was already interested in historical fiction, and coming from a background where I was a journalist, so you're writing about real things. It's just I can't interview people in quite the same way. So I was already interested in the idea of writing historical fiction, and I saw that the game was that, and talked to the team about it, and just. And from there, learning how passionate they were about it, how much they emphasized historical accuracy, that's what really drew me in. More than, I think, even, this period of history was, it is also very interesting, but more that I got to write about history, and they really wanted it to be right, and that's what sucked me in. And then once I started doing my research, which, I had to do a lot of to write properly, I realized how fascinating writing about this era is, because there's so much we don't know, but what we do know is the basis of all the institutions that we take for granted that exist to this day. The structure of religion and commerce and politics, a lot of that comes back to what we're studying in this era, so it's really fascinating.
So I hope you'll forgive me, but as somebody who also is a journalist, I want to ask, what inspired you to switch, I don't want to say careers, but switch tracks, move to a different kind of writing? What is it about game writing that drew you in?
Sure. I've been working on trying to have a really profound answer for this, but I don't. It's more just I was working in a magazine company, and I liked it. I didn't love it though. But I loved games, and I knew I loved to think about games and write about games, and, just, I guess one day it clicked that I love writing, and games need writers, so why not do that instead? So I applied to do my master's in game design, and then the week that I started that master's degree is when I joined the team at Sunburned as a writer, so it all kind of happened at once.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's the American dream.
Yeah.
Quit your job and become a writer.
Yeah.
So,
I
Brian,
was an editor, it was like...
I was gonna make a joke about writing the great American video game, and I was like, we're not there yet. Maybe we'll be. Brian, what's going on? What are you up to in there?
I'm back on the Great Whale Road again. I won't stop saying that. And I've made it to the first town, and I just saved a thrall from being executed. I had to buy the thrall, which when I first encountered that mechanic, I shook my head a bit, because I was like, oh, I'm buying a human being. And then I remembered, because I know about thralls because I've read up on this period of history as well, and I was like, oh, I'm going to revisit this when we get to the next town, because I did find, when I was like, oh, thralls, okay, they're popping up in the store, you make decisions around them. This scans, this is familiar. It was when I encountered the slave buying mechanic that I was like, whoa, that's really unexpected. That was unexpected, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that, because it was so it was surprising to see that in a game like this.
I think, yeah, I was thinking about it, and we had a discussion about it as well, but I think it's such a core part of that European history that thralls and the whole, if you think about it, the whole Roman Empire, and even afterwards, yeah, right, was built on a slave economy. So you had those big Roman farms, which were fully run and worked on by slaves from all over Europe. Mm-hmm. And then you had this in a much smaller scale across the whole of Northern Europe. And actually, if you think about it, it's like they were shipping English to Ireland. They were shipping Irish to England, English to Frankia. So there was everybody was trying to enslave each other. Yeah, it could be it could be the neighboring village, or it could be if you were committing a crime, you could be, depending on the Germanic law system. Yeah, it could be either exiled, or you could be sold. There was a lot of this. This was part of the culture, and not putting it into the game would have just would have just ignored it, and it did happen. Yeah, and actually, most of those thralls in most of the cultures back then, after a certain period, they were freed, and they were then living as part of the wider clan, tribe, family, as freedmen with certain obligations still. So they had to usually give like 10% of whatever their production in craftsmanship or farming was to their previous overlord. But they were in that way, the system was maintained. Because otherwise, I guess it would have been difficult to live on a small farm somewhere in the north of Denmark if you have like 5 thralls and they just actually have no no outlook. You might just wake up one day with your throat cut, or not wake up, and the farm taken over by new ownership. So I think there was a certain complicated social structure system with castes and class and all those things which work together, which was partially, most likely, Germanic. With, for instance, like Mary, you can jump in because you did actually more research on the Franks than I, with some Roman influences.
Sure, certainly. Well, I mean, it was such a big part of commerce, but also, crime and punishment was very much affected by the system. So it is, it's a tricky mechanic, but it would have felt disingenuous, I think, not to have it at the same time if you're trying to accurately present what a culture was like, with all the things that were good and things that were really, 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 really not good. This is part of the infrastructure that they were building, and the Franks certainly, so much of their influence was through commerce and through dominating everybody around them, that that became kind of an important part of the setting.
Yeah. I do have I want to highlight this mechanic for our audiences. I think, did you guys change the name of this item here? I'm looking at the thralls right now, thralls item, and I swear when I played this yesterday, it didn't say thralls, it said slaves. Did that change overnight, or was it thralls all along? I think it was always thralls.
I think there might have been one, depending on the translation. I'm not sure actually. I think the German version uses thralls as well. The English one, because I was playing the German version for the last few days, so I have to apologies. I'm losing track what the English version looks like, and I know most of the studio was playing the Spanish version very excitedly because we have it now. And there's also an Italian one, whereas I think it's God, my Italian is not acceptable. Something like esclavi, which I think is like the counterpart of the English word slave.
Yeah.
But it's like it depends on we usually try to use the terms of the respective culture. So that makes it a bit tricky because location names are actually, they are Old Dutch, or they are Old Danish, or they are actually Old English. So to make sure the whole setting feels authentic.
Right. The thing I wanted to point out was that the way this mechanic works is you can just buy. They're just they're handcuff icons that you can buy and sell upward along the coast. Here they're quite expensive, so there's not a great gameplay incentive for me to get into them right now, because I've sold my wares from production, and I'm just trying to make it my objective is not to make money or anything right now. But I admit that like jolted me. That seeing that specific mechanic jolted me, because of something I was talking about with some game developers at GDC. I did an article interviewing Jewish game developers in response to recent threats, and one student said something that stood out to me. She was talking about how during the game design workshop there were games that used like Holocaust aesthetics for shock value, and she said it made her jump a bit out of her skin, like to see developers who were trying to like get the message across that your design aesthetics can have meaning beyond what you import. And what she said to me was, I was worried about someone who would play that game if it was published, and instead of jumping out of their skin like everyone in the audience did, who would sit there and either go, they wouldn't even necessarily go, oh yeah, this is awesome. They might just go, oh, this seems normal, and she described that to me. And I thought that, like, how did you grapple that with, like, how did you think of the idea that players might look at the system and go, oh, sweet, I get to like trade people, like, which is certainly a reaction they could have.
I think, first of all, I think most I think in general, yeah, I mean, I've been playing computer games since the 70s, yeah, and I'm thinking that there have been quite a few games who had the mechanic. So I actually didn't, maybe because from a European perspective, it's maybe Central European perspective. Slavery is for sure a different topic than it is in the US and or in England, where a lot more of the economy of the 19th century was built all around slavery and of enslavement of people from the African continent. Whereas in Europe, medieval slavery was something where it was like people who were captured in intertribal wars, and actually there were like big economic streams where people were captured in the east or in the north of Europe or in England, and then they were, for instance, for periods of the time, they were either shipped to Ireland or later on a lot to Northern Africa. Mm-hmm. So there were like the biggest, especially later during the Viking Age, one of the biggest economic factors was the slave trade from Europe into North Africa, because there was a lot of the economic was more developed in North Africa, and a lot of if you look about all those Viking silver hoards defined, or the silver hoards defined like in trading centers in Europe, much of that silver could actually be gained through slave trade. Yeah, that was like interestingly slave trade from mostly Eastern Europe into across Germany, Spain, France, into North Africa and Spain. So and I think in general, it's I think it's in the sense of that people can reflect. And our game, because our core audience, I think, is like between 24 and 34 years old. Mm-hmm. I think in general, the player can reflect in a more mature way on what this means. Yeah, I would be more worried if it was a game for like maybe younger school children.
Mm-hmm. It's also there's never a quest. I mean, we don't. How do I say this perfectly? The story backs up the thralls, that having thralls and buying thralls is not good. Constantly, yeah. We do side quests about that. We have main quests that talk about that. So, while there is the mechanic in the market, because again, like we're trying to create an authentic setting. Yeah. It's never, in a quest. Also, it would be great to enslave people. Like, no, that's never part of it. In fact, we really, I think, hammer home how horrifying this part of that was over and over again. So it's not that we just dropped the mechanic in there as a trade mechanic and then ignored it for the rest of the game. I think that we looked at it in a nuanced way, the way we did all of the setting. Yeah. And certainly not with the intention, for shock value or anything like that, but looking at the setting and what it meant for the people who lived there.
I was going to say I think that's a fair response in that. I think we were researching and we saw some discussions a lot online about people talking a lot about where the quest line goes in this game. Mm-hmm. And I actually, like I said, I enjoyed the two quests I encountered that dealt with thralls, because I was sort of waiting for the hammer to drop on this, like, set them free kind of thing I'd done, and instead the characters were like, no, you're my best friend now, like, I'm going to like help you fight. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. Like, taking the kinder route felt pretty good early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I do think it's valuable to like make an effort to try and vividly recreate and like capture what it was to live in different eras. This is like not at all related, but I just can't stop thinking about how. So I was at this Rosicrucians Egyptian Museum last weekend, and they have a recreation of a real tomb from some, like, not even a pharaoh, just like some official, some like architect or something. And he was a guy of means, but he was nobody important. So we had like a decent tomb, but not like a whole pyramid or anything. Mm-hmm. And so you walk inside, and like the nice guide was like showing us through, and we were just kind of like, oh, that's cool, whatever, whatever. And in his burial chamber, which is like also filled with traps and like misdirections or whatever, there are these wall paintings, right? On all the walls, there are these beautiful recreated. It's the story of his life and who he wants to be and what the afterlife will be like and how he wants it to go. And at the very end, when he makes it successfully, like past the weighing of the heart with the feather and everything, and he makes it into the afterlife, he has all these like this beautiful celestial estate that is staffed by celestial slaves. And like his idea of a perfect afterlife is bringing order to this perfect celestial like plantation, basically. And all the slaves are psyched to be there because he's like a judicious master and he's nice and he's kind, and like that was just the way things were. And I know it's self-evident because we all learned that in school, but like seeing it again in front of you, you go, oh right, these are human beings, and on both sides, people were okay with it. Like that was just how it was. And I don't know. I find it valuable not to too easily forget that it wasn't so long ago that this stuff was okay. You know what I mean?
I don't think it was okay for the people who were enslaved. Even back then, I don't think it was. Yeah. I don't think they had the option. And I think we did a little bit more. When you dig a bit deeper, you find that some of the methods used were not what I would say, not the friendly kind. Yeah. So
yeah, I imagine not.
So I think in that way, I think people they were maybe happy to be alive. Yeah. But I don't think they were happy about the situation. Yeah. And I think, but the thing is, like the difference between maybe the life of a slave and the life of a free person, the difference was usually not that big. Yeah. So maybe that was why some of those societies had slavery for a longer time, because the difference was not so big. They could maintain it longer. Yeah. And at one point, the systems then changed because slavery in Europe in general ended. Yeah, in the high late medieval period, simply because the society changed and the system didn't work, and they had to actually still people they were not free, but they had more basic rights. Yeah, and then that took a long time, of course, in Europe until everybody had the same basic free rights. In some countries longer than in others. Yeah, but then we are back in modern history.
Yeah, so I'm so curious, when you're working on a work of historical fiction, how do you balance between accuracy and entertainment?
Oh God.
I'm going.
We just spent 5 minutes on that. No, but
let's get
like,
10 out of it.
God, like we just talk, like that's how hard it is.
Let's go deep.
No, I think every decision you have to make, you have to look at it and you say, okay, do I want to use this name? Nobody will be able to pronounce this name. Yeah, I mean, Mary and I, it's like Mary. We have like Peter Kerkhoff in Holland. He helps us with. He's like an old Germanic linguist, and he helps us with like some of the names. So Mary sends me a long list, and he says, no, this is like late medieval, high medieval. You have to use this instead. And Mary was like, but this name is so cool, and then suddenly you have to do something like Lodube, yeah? And you have to work each name out, or Aslakar, or...
What if it's that name, but we threw in a bunch of L's? Okay. So it's great. So rough. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, but I feel like, the stories of people are the stories of people are the stories of people. So at the core of it is always going to be a story about people trying to survive and trying to interact with one another and trying to not kill each other so much, or maybe they are. And then the rest of that is the details that you layer on top of it, right? So at the core of every story, every side quest, and every core story is not easy to hammer out, but that's not the difficult part. It's then figuring out how it would work. That's where all the research has to come in.
Yeah, and then of course you have certain limitations in the game system, which sometimes you then have, because we had a game system already, and with some of the time we can adapt the game system to the writing, but some of the time it has to be the other way around, and that's often more painful, because then you have written something you really, really love, and both Mary and I, we had the moment, said, okay, I really want to put this in the game, but sometimes it's not possible, and you have to then just all can only be put parts in or rewrite it a bit.
Yeah, and you were doing this all in early access too. What was that like to try and juggle the needs of the game versus the story you wanted to tell versus the community that you were presumably sort of working in concert with to try and like hone this?
I think because I was doing most of the community management, I think early access to me was surprisingly easy in a way that the community management actually, that's something I quite enjoy. I think the problem is it's like balancing it with like studio management, writing, and community management plus a bit of PR. That was my struggle, but I enjoyed the community part of it because people who like the setting, who like the idea of such a game, they really engage on a deep level. So you have discussions about the writing style. You have discussions about the terminology. We have lots of people who come from like the archeo gaming angle. Lots of people who like who read or who teach history or archaeology or similar fields. It's quite interesting to actually have all that together in a mix with players from other areas and actually try to get those influences in. But in general, we didn't let the story influence by early access. We tried to limit that to the game mechanics, and say, okay, this is what we have, and then we ask the players to say, okay, which areas do you like, and which areas shall we improve, and then we worked on those.
Was it? Go ahead, Brian.
Well, you know what's funny is like in theory, the promise of early access is you get to help a player gets to help shape the game's direction, into 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
But there are obviously things like the push and pull then becomes, well, they can give feedback, but they really can't affect these things. And story is one of in theory, I feel like Valve thinks that story should be just as effectable as anything else. But obviously, as developers, you have to keep in mind what you know about these things. So how do you think about that? Like the idea that you're sort of telling players, "Hey, come help us," and then they come and tell you everything they want to do about the story, and you're like, "Well, we can't let you help with that."
Actually, you would be surprised. I think people actually didn't ask much about. There wasn't that much suggestions or feedback on the story itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think people actually excited to experience the story and they want to know more about the story, and they were saying, "Hey, when do I get the next chapter?"
Mm-hmm.
But they were not saying, "Hey, why don't you write this?" It was more like about certain elements. How does the combat work? And can I extend can I actually upgrade my settlement? Those things were more important for the players to interact with us on. And I think the story thing was like where you actually want to experience the story and you don't want to spoil it by being too involved with it. You actually want to be surprised by it.
Mm-hmm. And finding out which characters players were getting attached to, I don't know that it influenced the story as much, but it influenced the way I saw the characters. And I was writing some of their personal quests, so that was pretty important. So, for a character I thought was just a salty, grumpy old man, everybody's like, "Oh, he's the grandfather I never had." I was like, well, okay, so that's cool. So let's do that.
I actually love that. I love that anecdote. I don't know why. It resonates with me that like you drop in like the salty rule of the man and everyone's like, "Grandpa."
Exactly. Yes. So his quest got a little more to the grandpa note than I'd been planning.
Yeah, it's quite strange. But you write different characters. I think we have quite a few different ones. So we have like from the salty grandpa to the grumpy widow to the deranged serial killer. We have quite a few characters, and it's sometimes quite strange to try to. Because actually, all those people can live in a small village, and you try to somehow put them all on a ship, and then think about where the story can go.
I have one more early access question. You all did a pretty significant change to how combat works, right? Because I saw some old screenshots that were more card-based, and that's completely gone here. Can you talk about that process and why that happened and what you learned from it?
Okay, I think from the original design, the Gateway Lord started off as a digital card game, and we moved away from that already after a failed Kickstarter campaign back in 2015. So that was something where we said, okay, we tried something out and we realized we were going down that design route. We could never integrate it that well into the whole story-based end-to-end game. It would stand out too much. So we moved into other direction. Cost us maybe 6 months of rework, which was slightly painful. But at the start of early access, we had something which was like a hybrid, and I actually personally I quite enjoyed it because it was very fast, but because many of our players came like from the tactic, from the turn-based tactic side, they were saying, hey, actually it's fun, but it's a little bit limited. So we had like multiple discussions with the community and in the studio, and then we created like a closed prototype of a new combat system. And I can't remember, Mary, we had it like I think for a month or so, or 2-3 weeks. We had it in on a separate branch in early access, and people were giving us feedback, and we said, okay, yes, that works, and then we implemented that.
Yep.
Nice.
A few weeks, and we got pretty fast feedback, so that's good. We like that.
Do you feel like you missed out on anything by not having this kind of staggered ongoing launch that has become almost de rigueur now for a lot of developers? But I remember, a lot of people still are concerned that when they go into early access, they get that big launch right when they first come out in early access, and they get that ongoing revenue stream. But then when the game is like 1.0 and the game is like ready to ship, it can be hard to sort of cut through the noise in an incredibly crowded marketplace and say like, look, we have a game, it's out, it's done. Was that a concern at all, or did it go particularly well?
I think that's especially if you're based in Spain, it's even a bigger concern, because if you're based in Spain, you have additional challenges to overcome in sense of like getting global visibility. Yeah, if you're based in Austin, or you're based in New York, or based in LA, or based in San Francisco, or even in Toronto or Montreal, you have access to, or Berlin for that matter, you have access to a network, a local network of studios, of large game dev meetings. Yeah, if there's the game dev meeting in Valencia, then on a good week it might be 20 people, and 10 of them are game students, and then most of the others are like single developers who work on a hobby project. If you go to a game dev meeting in Montreal, or in a place where folks like Stoic hang out, that has a different impact. Yeah, if you have a chat with a studio, or with people who work in the industry who shipping games which have like hundreds of thousands of players, who actually have like contracts with indie publishers or larger publishers, which maybe even have representatives in your town, makes a big difference. Whereas we have to, if I want to go to New York, that's like I have to go to Madrid first, get on a plane. It's not that easy. Yeah. If I want to go to LA, like I did like back in 2015. Yeah. That's like a 36-hour round trip, one direction. Yeah. With like going to Zurich, going from Zurich to somewhere, and then crossing the American continent to spend a few days in LA. So it's a lot trickier. Yeah.
Well, but you've just now embarked on this game development career. Like, do you think going forward you're going to try and stay in Valencia, or are you interested in maybe like picking up sticks and trying somewhere else?
To be honest, I quite like it here. Yeah, the thing is, like, a lot will depend on, of course, how well the Great Wall Road does. Yeah, and because as the first game, it's always it's more or less always the make and break decision for a small studio like us. Yeah. So for us, from this perspective, is we try to make the best game we can. And I think it didn't answer the question before. We said, is it about the staggered release? I think nowadays with digital distribution, most of the games actually have staggered releases. Yeah. So if you look at it, it's like most of the games now have a relatively long tail, where you see many small studios use like a free update model to bring players back and get the game on the Steam front page every few months again. Yeah, with a new content update, and this works well for certain IPs. Mention some friends like Battle Brothers, who have been in early access for I think 2 years. They have left a week before us, doing very well. very, very great game, and we play it in the studio occasionally if we have like a spare half an hour. And there are many other titles like that where they try to build up a community and then actually serve that community. And I think
Nice.
that's something we're trying to work on as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. We should probably start wrapping up. Brian, can you fill us in on your journey so far? How's it going?
Oh, I don't want to. I'm having fun with this battle. I don't want to end for today.
Wow. We can keep
Are you
going.
winning?
Yeah. I don't know how. It's something about it's very simple, but the percent. This is something I'm actually giving you guys very favorable comparison to Banner Saga. Something about this percentage, the way the percentages play out, the way the balancing, trying to get the shields down versus taking the health down. Something about the fact that the AI doesn't completely overwhelm you. It's a good flow. I'm feeling like the only thing that I liked that Banner Saga bowled me over with that isn't here is the way that their turn system works and how it prioritizes people and you trying to weaken everyone before instead of trying to take them on one. But still, I'm just sitting here trying to think about who I'm hitting next. And that's what a strategy game needs to work, I think, is make sure they care about who they punch next.
Yeah, and I think we always try to create something in a way different from a say game cultural perspective. I always call it internally hack and slash tactics. Yeah, and I hope we get that right.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the broken shield thing. It's a little the animation is obviously not as overly complex, but even it's still very charming. Just to this kind of I don't know.
Thanks.
I have this thought that it reminds me of of this very old school way of playing these kind of games. King of Dragon Pass, like I said at the top, it comes to mind, but I have to bring it up again. Just in that, it feels very even though King of Dragon Pass is such a great game that keeps the aesthetics and the art way down. But what happens, the interest factor is way up still, and just that style of game design, I think, is coming through here. So here I am, heaping praise on you as to buy us time for 1 o'clock. But I guess I can start.
I'm blushing, Brian.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I guess I'll start the wrap-up ceremonies. Thank you all again for tuning in. This has been a nice chat. Thank you, Rhetoric, Mizotaku, for watching with us today. We hope you enjoyed getting some of these early access thoughts from our wonderful friends here at Sunburn Games. The game is The Great Whale Road. It's now available on Steam out of early access. We'll have this video if you missed part of this conversation, we'll have it up for you on Gamasutra.com later today. Be sure to join us next week. We've got some more cool developer interviews coming down the pipe. I don't want to say who it is yet because we're still locking them in, but I'm just very thankful that we get to keep talking to cool developers. If you also want to talk to more cool developers, scroll down and hit the follow button, and that way we'll be able to send you more information about who we're talking to, when we're talking to them, etc. I'm Brian Francis, contributing editor to Gamasutra. Alex, Mary, and Joachim, if you want to sign yourselves out.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, thanks for watching.
Yeah, it was fantastic to have you both. Best of luck with the game and in all your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Have a nice day, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.